Hey, it's Sonia. Today, Michael Ignatieff is here at the Hall building at Concordia University, and there's some people protesting outside, and Sam Labrier is going to confront him on, I think, the carbon tax issue.
Pale imitation of a beer can label. It's what he called our flag.
For years, the man's been out of this country.
Wait, hold on. He's been out of the country longer than the current Minister of Heritage has been alive?
Yeah. Isn't that ridiculous?
That's
And he wants to come back and be Prime Minister.
But which one is Michael Ignatieff? Is he Canadian, Russian, American, British, or Canadian? I can't tell.
That's a good question.
I can't
figure it out.
Maybe he's all four.
He's a reptilian.
Wow.
I wanted to ask you today about your green energy plans. First, let me preface my question by saying that up until about 6-8 months ago, I was a huge supporter of the idea of green energy. However, now not so much. And the reason why, the question I want to ask you is, how do you propose that we in Canada do things like manufacture cars, manufacture airplanes, or even simple things like forging steel with green energy technologies like solar, wind, geothermal?
You're saying it's unrealistic.
It's impossible. You can't generate the amount of power necessary.
No. I think that skepticism is actually a good way to start. Let's not promise people false green rainbows. Let's understand where we are. I mean, it's consistent with what I said earlier about the oil sands. I mean, this is very tough stuff. We have to have a portfolio vision of our energy future, in which we increase the amount of renewable energy, solar, wind. In Atlantic Canada, it'll be tidal. We've got huge potential in tidal, right? Geothermal. All that stuff's important. And then I'm going to say something you're not going to like, which is I think nuclear has a place here. I don't see how we can meet the climate change crisis unless we have some part, not a huge part, but a part for nuclear.
I'm actually very pro-fusion.
You're pro-fusion. Well, that's good to know. But your point here is, let's be realistic about what green energy can actually deliver. The other key element here, which would be consistent with what you're saying, is energy efficiency. When I talk to industrial workers in my riding, and I've got a lot of industrial workers in my riding who work in auto parts and that kind of stuff, and you ask them, how are you going to keep your jobs? They know one thing. When they melt aluminum to do casting, they've got to get their energy costs down. They got to shoot less heat up the stack and burn less electricity, right? They got to get it to those temperatures, but we got to find a way to do that in a more efficient way. If we don't, we're out of the auto parts business. It's that simple. So people talk about green energy and environmental stuff as if it's a kind of add-on. No, it's the key to our economic survival. And those industrial workers understand that. And we have to incentivize that. We have to make it much easier to transition to more intensive, more efficient energy use than we've done so far. And we can't go on promising, this gets back to your starting premise, we can't promise Canadians green solutions that aren't realistic about the industrial realities and the competitive realities we face.
You cannot have industry with zero carbon emissions unless you have a clean energy source like a nuclear fusion, which can generate large amounts of electricity cleanly. But these green technologies they normally talk about, solar, wind, tidal, geothermal, cannot generate anywhere close to the amount of electricity that we're going to need now, let alone 50 years from now.
Plus, like you also pointed out, you have to use some kind of energy to create the solar panels in the first place.
Yeah, and you can't make solar panels from solar panels. They do not generate enough energy to be used in the industrial process to make them. So how are you even going to make solar panels if your whole economy switches to a solar panel or a wind or a geothermal based electrical grid? It's impossible. And not just solar panels, anything requiring large amounts of energy in the industrial process, we won't be able to make anymore.
So what do you think will happen?
If we
What
switch,
will
what's
be
the
the
point
result?
of these zero
Well,
carbon?
what will be the result? Yeah, if they implement these
The
kind
whole
of
point
things that
is
are,
depopulation.
exactly, our quality of life will go down.
Quality of life is
price
going
of
down.
living will go up. Depopulation.
No more development, And it means that the third world can never develop, because if you're telling Africa and the rest of the third world that they can never emit carbon dioxide, then that means that they can never set up steel plants, they can never build railroads, they can never set up their own industries and develop their own countries. And that's the whole point of the global warming scam, and that's the whole point of this green energy revolution that they're trying to push.
Right.
I am a very strong environmentalist. Like, I believe that there are many, many environmental issues, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, mercury being burned by coal plants. Mercury being emitted by coal plants, but the CO2 that's being emitted by the coal plants is not the issue.
Right.
And I used to believe in global warming up until a few months ago, and I used to believe in solar panels and windmills, but go check it out. They are not an option.
And I just want to add something. And another thing is that I've been reading about this recently, that really the backlash of the biofuels is just how much it's driving up the cost of food, and people are starving to death. And in fact, they're eating dirt cookies in Haiti, which is all really great if your goal is to reduce the population.
Carbon tax, green energies is the new imperialism. It's the new way of saying you cannot have development and you cannot expand your population. In fact, if the whole world were to suddenly adopt this carbon tax and all these green technologies, you would see within a few years a massive fall in the world population. You would see death rates and starvation rates skyrocket. And that's exactly what these imperialists want, what the elitists want. They want depopulation. So if you want depopulation, if you want millions of people to die, then yeah, keep pushing global warming, carbon tax, and solar panels.